So our presentation today is called Power Up Your Power Automate with Expressions. We are Stacy Cope and Austen Brown, and we are part of Prenger Solutions Group. So our role at Prenger Solutions Group is we provide a lot of custom fundraising consulting for mostly Catholic dioceses across the country, but we've developed some cool software products as we go to help us with our work that we now help other people with. So we're a bunch of fundraisers that are getting into more computery things, which is fun. Ask Genius is a sponsor of this conference. We're super excited to be here. And if you haven't checked out Ask Genius, please go to Expo Room 1 and see more about us there. Ask Genius is a really cool product that provides custom ask strings for each person in your mailing list, and we've seen some really huge and awesome results. So please come check us out and find us in Expo Room 1. Austen and I are part of the Automate Genius division at Prenger Solutions Group, and we basically do custom fundraising automations for our Razor's Edge users. So we're going to share with you a little bit about what we've learned as low coders using expressions in Power Automate.
Yes, so Stacy and I don't know code except for what we've had to figure out trying to advance with Power Automate, and we both started with the accelerator course that's available online. So that's always where I tell folks to, you're interested in this, go watch those videos first. So what exactly are expressions? So I like to think of expressions as those that you would find in Excel, so like functions or rules in words, and really what they are, their purpose in a flow is to perform a specific action, and they can do a wide variety of things. So today we're only going to talk about a handful, but there are tons and tons of expressions out there that you can utilize to make your flows run better. And here are just a few high-level examples of what you can do with expressions within a flow. So here's how to use an expression. So we're going to start off by using a single expression, and this is going to be a couple of screenshots. So to use an expression, you would go to your dynamic content window within Power Automate and click on the expressions tab, and you can start typing out your expression, and Power Automate will try to guess which one you're choosing, and you can either continue typing that out or you can choose from this drop-down menu. You make sure that you have two parentheses and you put your cursor in the middle. From this point, you follow the syntax of sort of the expression. Power Automate will give you a helpful guide. I wasn't able to capture it in the screenshot, but it's like usually right around here. And it will tell you what's needed to fulfill the expression in Power Automate. And we can see here that we're using dynamic content. So leaving our cursor here, we've gone back to the other tab, and we're going to grab gift date. And the expression we're using, format date time, requires this little extra bit at the end that tells Power Automate how you want the date or the time formatted. And so we want it listed as a regular date. To see all possible formats that you can use for format date time, you can access that through the link down here. And then so we can see we have a compose here where we're going, it's what this expression actually looks like and sort of the end result. I will say, as with the theme of this conference so far, leave notes for your future self, right? So you can add notes to your actions, and my favorite thing is to add a note for expressions, because this window is so very small and it's very difficult to figure out what exactly is making up that expression. And so putting it in a note makes it so much easier to read and figure out what you did 3 months ago to figure out how to move forward. The best part about this is you don't have to do just one expression at a time. You can create nested expressions. And so Power Automate will run those concurrently, and it's executed from the inside out. So using the previous example of format date time, you can use UTC now, which will generate today's date. So inside out, it finds today's date to the exact second, and then runs it through your format date time function, where we want to see it as month, month, day, day, year, year, year. And this is what it spits out the other side. So very easy to use. And once you figure out expressions and how they all talk to each other, or how they can be used together, this is a great thing to use. So rather than breaking these all up into like 3 different composes, you can just put it all into one place. So here are some of our most commonly used and favorite expressions. So the first one up is first last. And what I use these to avoid those ever-parent apply to each loops that you find yourself in when you're trying to look through a string or an array to find a particular piece of data. So by using the first expression that we can see here, it looked through this array and it found the first item in it, and the last, of course, found the last item. Yeah. And Stacy, how could this be useful in the real?
One place that I've used this a lot is when there's not even multiple things in the array, right? So for an example, additional salutations come through as arrays, but as we know in Razor's Edge, you're only allowed to put one additional salutation of each type into a record, right? So if you've already pulled out your informal salutation or whatever it's called, it's still going to give you an array and try to do an apply to each loop, but you could use first to just bypass that whole thing and just grab that one because you know that's the only one in there. So that's where I find myself using this the most.
Stacy, do you want to take this one?
Yes, sure. So concat. So this one is similar to the Excel function concatenate, if you're familiar with that, where it basically takes a bunch of data that you tell it and it puts it into one long string. So this down here on the bottom left is kind of our example, and what we're doing here is we're creating an acknowledgement letter. So we want the acknowledgement letter to have a file name that has, you know, today's date and the donor's name and the donor's ID. So what we've done is we use the compose to do our format date time to get today's date. So that's the first thing we're concatenating. Then you'll see a little comma in there. And then there's 2 single quotes with a space in between because we're putting a comma in or a space into the, thank you, Austen. We're putting a space into the file name, right? Then we want to do, we're doing our dynamic content to get the constituent's name in, another space, and then the constituent lookup ID. So this is where we use this the most often, I think, is when creating letters and you need a dynamic file name for each, you know, letter in your batch or whatever it is, so that it can be reused over and over. So this one, okay, this one, string int float. So these are data types. Let's talk about data types, right? So you will find when you're working in Power Automate that there are different types of data and there's different definitions for those. So a string is basically text or characters or numbers. But a string is kind of a static. It's in Excel, it would be comparable to a text format for a cell, right? Int is integer, so that is a whole number, and float is a number with anything after the decimal point. So where this comes into play is that sometimes numbers are stored in databases as a string, even though they are in fact numbers. A good example of this is like a zip code, right? We don't want to store a zip code as a number because anybody with a 0 in their first character is going to get dropped if we're pretending it's a number, because it's not, right? We need all 5 of those characters for the zip code to work. So zip codes are numbers, but they're going to be stored in databases as a string. So there are places in Power Automate where you will run into issues that you can't identify because Power Automate thinks it's looking at a number, but the database thinks it's looking at a string. So you can solve this by changing the data types of some of your content or some of your data points to make them match up so that Power Automate knows what it's looking for. An example, if you are trying to use a switch condition to pull in different fundraisers. So this flow that we're looking at here, I was trying to have different content come out for each of 3 fundraisers, right? But when I did this switch, Power Automate thought the fundraiser ID was the number, Razor's Edge thought the fundraiser ID was a string, and it just didn't match. So it just kept telling me, well, we didn't find it, it wasn't there, right? So I didn't get a really clear error message that indicated your data types don't match. It just said, I don't know what this is. So if you're running into errors that are like that, play around with the data types, see if you can switch things up and get them to match. Because if we change this to change that string ID to an integer, then the flow works.
So many headaches with this, by the way. I like just running things and be like, what do you mean it didn't find anything? I know for a fact this exists. But yeah, so this is a great thing, especially since error codes won't always tell you what's wrong. Like, I know error codes are notoriously confusing anyway, but it's just so frustrating when you just get one that says bad request or nothing found, and you're like, that is wildly unhelpful. Let's go try a bunch of random things and hope this works out. All right, so the next one up is one of my favorites. I use empty a lot in various flows. So in Razor's Edge, we have an operator in query called isBlank, and I use that, or is not blank, right? So I use that frequently, and so my logic sort of went there when I was building flows that wanted to account for instances of missing data to sort of disqualify them from continuing through the flow. And so what this does is when used in a conditional, it creates an isBlank operator. So you could, sadly I don't have a screenshot of it here, but you can use it in a conditional to say true is equal to, and then this expression of empty for whatever it is. And if it returns with a yes, then you know that sort of gets side off to the other side. And if it says no, you continue on with the flow. And so I use this a lot for managing errors in the database. So if like a salutation is missing, I don't want to generate an acknowledgement letter, right? So I'm just trying to think of things ahead of time and manage that throughout the process. And maybe someone that doesn't have a salutation gets an email to your DBA or whoever's in charge of managing the error exceptions for this flow that says, hey, go find this record, you need to update their address, these salutations, and they'll be included the next time around. So. All right, and then our last one that we're talking about today is union. So this is wildly helpful when putting together sort of complex digests that might be including various things that could be duplicative in the result. Or if you're trying to combine multiple arrays together, you can use a union expression. So we can see here that donation is listed twice, and in the final result, it's only listed once. So this is another good one to have for various things. And then that's our presentation for today. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll try to scroll through and answer things.
In the meantime, if you would like our slides or any other information, write down our email addresses so you can get with us anytime. We did have one question from Brenda about special characters. I think that was when we were talking about Concat. So it will allow you to put them in. Some of them will not work with SharePoint or those kinds of things. So keep that in mind, especially if your data has any, org names with a number sign in it or something like that. Actually, Haley Giuseppe's flow with letters, what is that one called, Austen? Has a really good replace for, or a really good formula for catching special characters in constituent names and pulling them out so that you can get it to work. But yeah, you can add hyphens and whatever's allowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a null string you can also use as like to find empties in a conditional. You can also use a string with 2 quote marks in like single quotes with a space between them as a means to find empty things. I've just found that the empty expression works in most cases. For me, there are some weird instances with Razor's Edge data where null or a string with sort of a blank thing didn't quite work as anticipated. But yeah, so this is another part of all of this is you're going to figure things out through trial and error as well.
Oh yeah, Alex, thank you. Encode URI component. That is the thing that will fix your special characters so that your file names will work.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. Rakesh, what is your, could you be more specific about your question? Do you have some other question about the nested data? As Austen said, basically those work from the inside out, but yes, awesome. Okay. So this one finds, Haley just put her code in for that. Everybody copy and paste that. So it'll get all the spaces and all the weird things out of your file names when you're concatenating. Oh, that's a great question. So Rakesh is asking about if the result contains JSON in your nested expressions. I have not tried anything that returns that way. So yeah, if I ever had an expression that had JSON returning in it, I would just start over and do it again. So there is probably a way. Alex probably knows how to do it.
Yes, I refer to Alex to answer those questions.